Hello students, welcome back to yet another lesson with Mr. Mohana. Today we are going to look at a narrative writing task. Okay, so without further ado, let us look at the question and some techniques on how to tackle this question. Okay, let us look at the question. Now, the question here given to you is, write a story about how a worker at a store dealt with an armed robbery. So if you see in this question, I have underlined the phrases how a worker at a store and an armed robbery. So first, you have to take note that it's only one person as the worker in this story, and the story happens in a store, and then it revolves around an armed robbery. Okay, please take these basic things and keep in mind first. Okay, so please do not add an extra worker in your story, okay, and make an armed robbery into a snatch theft. Okay, a lot of students make this kind of mistakes. Okay, now, when you write your story, there are a few things that you can take into consideration before you start writing. First, the question says how a worker at a store dealt with an armed robbery. You can always start describing the store and also the worker. Okay, so when you describe the worker, the few questions that I have given here can help you to actually describe the worker. For example, how does he look like? What was he doing at the store? And was he alone? Okay, so of course he has to be alone in the story. So you can give a reason why was he alone. Probably he was alone because his colleague was having a break, or probably his colleague had some emergency things to do. So probably these are some extra ideas that you can add in to give a reason why he was alone on that night. Okay, probably it was night. You can decide the time whether you want it to be daylight robbery or if you want it to be a midnight robbery. So it's up to you. So basically, normally, when you talk about an armed robbery, it happens a lot of times. It happens at night. So probably in this story, the story that I'm going to share with you, it happened at night. Okay. Now, as you describe the worker, you may also add some ideas to describe the store or the shop. For example, the things in the shop were arranged neatly. It shows the characters, how the character is very hardworking to keep the store neat and tidy. You know, all these little ideas to just link to the story. Okay, or adding more ideas, because a lot of times students write very short essays and they do not know how to elaborate them. Okay, to fit into the 350 word limit given. So these are some extra things that you can add in your essay when you are writing this story. Okay, you do not necessarily immediately jump into the armed robbery. As a beginning, in the start or the starter, you can describe the worker, you can describe the shop, and also you can describe the things in the shop. Okay, how the things were arranged. Okay, those are the few things that you can add in to your story. And also do not forget to add in the setting. For example, the time setting, what time it was, okay, and the environment, was it very crowded or was it very quiet? You know, these are the type of settings that you want to add or you want to set in the beginning of your story. Okay, as I say all this, please take a notebook and take note of all these ideas that I'm telling you, yeah? Okay, and the next thing that you can actually describe is the armed robbery. Now, if you look at the armed robbery, there are two things that you can describe. First, you can describe the robbers. How did they look like? And what were they wearing? Okay, were they wearing very decent clothes? Okay, and what did they say when they entered the shop? And probably, if you are talking about robbers, probably they were wearing a face mask. Okay, so those are the things that you can keep in mind when you write your essay. Now, on one side, you describe the robbers. After describing the robbers, you can also bring in the robbery. Now, so when you describe the robbery, you can actually say what time. Okay, as I said, the time setting I've already put in here, what time it was, and how did the robbers enter the shop. For example, were they coming in very calmly, or were they rushing into the store and immediately asking you to put up your hands with a gun? You know, all those things. Try to imagine how did they enter, or did they had a very calmly posture when they come in, or only and after that they turn into that calmly posture turn into violence. You know, these are the small little things that you can think and add in your essay. And when they come in, how did the worker react to the robbers? Okay, was he like fighting with them, or was he like defending himself, or did he know any martial art to fight them, or he just gave up, he did not do anything? Think about all this. Okay, so before you start writing, as a practice, you look at this question and try to play in your mind how you want to write your essay. What are the things that you want to add, keeping all these questions and ideas in mind. Now, you see, using this outline itself that I have given here, this outline can help you to actually write a 350 words essay. And at the ending, you may end the story by stating the action taken by the worker after the robbery. So this depends on how you bring the story forward. Okay, for example, did he fight with them, or did he just let them to steal everything they want, and then he called the police? Okay, and then he helped the police to search for them, and finally they were caught. How you want to bring the story will decide the ending of the story. Okay, so this is a simple outline that I have given to help you to actually narrate or write a narrative on how a worker at the store dealt with an armed robbery. Now, the story is supposed to be written in simple past tense, right? So keep that in mind. So do not bring the idea of simple present tense here. Now that we have looked at these ideas, you may want to pause this video and start writing an essay on your own, or write a short draft before we go to the next slide. In the next slide, I'm going to share with you some vocabulary that is related to this story that you can use when you write your essay. So it's up to you whether you want to pause the video and start doing some brainstorming, or you may just continue watching it. Okay, now let us look at the next slide. Okay, these are some examples of vocabulary that you can use when you want to write your essay. Now, first look at this: muffled voice, stoop to tricks. Okay, the first one, muffled voice, it means voice that is unclear, and stoop to tricks, meaning to say trying to fight back. Okay, so a sentence that we can build from these two phrases are: we just want the money. The muffled voice behind the mask stated, you won't be harmed unless you stoop to tricks. Okay, this is an example that you can use. Okay, so why do I use the word muffled voice here? Probably they were wearing a mask and they were talking from behind the mask, so their voice was unclear. Okay, and the next one, if you see authoritative, ruffian, and scampered helter-skelter. Now, authoritative means showing power and importance. Okay, it shows power and importance. Ruffians means gangster, and scampered helter-skelter means running in all directions. Okay, so here I put these three together in a sentence. If you see, at the shrill sound of the whistles and authoritative shout from the police, the ruffians scampered helter-skelter away. Alright, now the next one, nemesis, razor sharp, and glint maliciously. So, nemesis means enemy, razor sharp means very sharp, and glint maliciously means to shine dangerously. Now, you look at this. His nemesis was holding a razor sharp blade that glinted maliciously under the light. Now, you can picturize this, the glint showing something that is a horrific scene. It's not showing something positive. That is why I said glint maliciously means to shine dangerously. The shine shows that it's so sharp that it can cut your neck. Okay, so that is what it means, yeah? Something that is so shiny that it can be very dangerous. Now, the next one, gawk at or armed robber. Stare in shock. Gawk at means you stare in shock. And then armed robber means a robber who has a weapon. And eyes widened in dismay. It means eyes widened in shock and fear. So I put that together. He gawked at the armed robber standing before him as his eyes widened in dismay. Okay, the next one. Loot, meaning to say money and valuables obtained from illegal means. And a sentence that we can write for this word is having the loot secured the man fled, meaning to say after he has taken everything, he ran away. And dimly lit corner. A corner where there is not much light and hence it's dark. So, example of a sentence, some bicycles were parked at the dimly lit corner, right? Okay, so if you look at this list here, okay, so we have nerve-wracking episode, which means a frightening incident. Evil can never prevail, which means evil can never win, or evil cannot win. So a sentence that has these two ideas would be, it was through this nerve-wracking episode that we experienced the efficiency of our police force at first hand, and be truly convinced that evil can never prevail. Okay, now menacing gait or trigger an involuntary gasp. Okay, so menacing gait means threatening figure. Okay, and trigger an involuntary gasp means to cause an uncontrollable expression of shock. Now, if you say menacing gait, meaning to say it's referring to somebody who has not so friendly or something, a figure, or you see somebody who is, you feel not right when you look at somebody. So that is what we say menacing gait, right? Okay, now look at the sentence that I have written here. The menacing gait of the approaching figure triggered an involuntary gasp from Amin, meaning to say the not so friendly figure caused Amin to feel shocked and he took a step backward. Alright, now escalate means to grow in extent. Outrageous and blatant audacity, meaning to say boldness to do bad things. Now, example of sentences. Their mischief had escalated to the extent of outrageous and blatant audacity. Now, if you look at these examples, I have shared with you some examples of phrases that you can use when describing an armed robbery or any robbery, or you can also use these ideas to describe a snatch theft that occurs. Alright, any question related to robbery or snatch theft, you can use these ideas, okay, this vocabulary. And if you see, next I'm going to share with you an example of an essay for the question that I discussed just now. And I may have used some of the ideas or the vocabulary that I have shared with you here. Okay, now let us look at the sample essay. Alright, now let us look at an example of an essay that I have written for the questions that we have discussed earlier. And you may look at some of the ideas that I have written here. It is related to the questions that have been asked in the earlier discussion. Okay, so this is the first paragraph and let us look at it. The number of customers entering the convenience store was diminishing as the night wore on. Okay, diminishing here means to becoming lesser and lesser. Jimmy was starting to feel the boredom and tiredness setting into his body. Trudging to the cashier counter, he let out a long yawn and stretched his arms and upper torso. He had just finished replenishing the chilled drinks and chocolate bars. His new colleague, James, had reported sick last minute, so Jimmy was left all alone for the night. Okay, so this is the first paragraph. Now, if you see the ideas that I've used here, I have used double emphasis, boredom and tiredness. Okay, you may take note of these ideas. Jimmy was starting to feel the boredom and tiredness. Trudging to the cash counter or the cashier counter. Trudging means you walk as if you have a heavy load behind your back, trudging. So I didn't use the word walk. You see, walk is like too general. And when you use the word trudging, it becomes more specific and you can picturize the idea. So that is why I use trudging. And yeah, you look, earlier I have told you that add a detail why you were alone. So the last sentence here gives you a detail why James was left alone at the shop on that night. Okay, his new colleague James had reported sick last minute. So Jimmy was left all alone for the night. So this is the first paragraph. Okay, now let us look at the next paragraph. Okay, he busied himself tidying the countertop with deliberate fastidiousness as an alternative to keep his sleepiness at bay. Moreover, he reasoned to himself a neat counter would be a more comfortable place to work at. He proceeded to clear and neaten the cluttered and disorganized cabinets. He was squatting down with his back turned to the counter when he heard the familiar sound of the doorbell. Okay, he cast a quick look at his watch. It was already 1:30 a.m. Time flies, he thought with relief. Okay, so this is the second paragraph. So here you can see some activity done by Jimmy. Okay, he was cleaning up so that he would not fall asleep. And then I have also used some double emphasis here again. For example, to clear and neaten, cluttered and disorganized. Okay, to describe the environment of the shop. Okay, and some of his actions. Now, if you see here, I have used a very short direct speech. Time flies. Okay, you see, you know when you write narrative, you need to put in some ideas. For example, some direct speech to bring life to your narrative writing. Okay, to make your narrative writing look alive. So without direct speech, your narrative writing would be rather bland. So keep that in mind, yeah. So try to put in direct speech in your essay. Keep that in mind. So if you have never done this, start doing it now. Okay, now let us look at the next paragraph. He stood up to face the customer who had just entered. The menacing gaze triggered an involuntary gasp from Jimmy, who stepped back in alarm. Placing his arm on the table behind to steady himself, Jimmy gawked at the armed robber standing before him. His eyes widened in dismay. The latter was brandishing a razor-sharp blade that glinted maliciously under the light. Only one thought crossed his befuddled mind at that moment. What bad luck, he cursed. Okay, now if you see, these are some ideas that I have discussed earlier in the vocabulary part that I have included in this paragraph. Okay, menacing grade triggered an involuntary gasp from Jimmy. Jimmy gawked at the armed robber standing before him. Okay, the latter was brandishing a razor-sharp blade that glinted maliciously under the light. Okay, so these are some examples that I've put in, okay, to bring some ideas of how he felt and how the robber looked like, how he came in, and so on. And if you see, I ended this paragraph with another short direct speech as well. Now, if you're not so good at direct speeches, so what you can do, you can just use short ones like this for a start. Okay, so that you can get better and better from where you started. Now, it is important for you to get started somewhere. So, starting with some short direct speeches would be a great idea, right? Okay, so let us look at the next paragraph. Now, if you look at this paragraph, I've just added a few lines, okay, of direct speeches. We just want the money. The muffled voice behind the mask stated, "You won't be harmed unless you stoop to tricks." Okay, so I just put it here in a short paragraph to give you the idea of direct speeches. Okay, now let us go to the next paragraph. The sound from the door drew Jimmy's attention away from the first man. He turned to find a second robber striding towards him, with a deadly blade pointed against his neck. He voiced no protest, but emptied every note and cent in the cash register into the awaiting black canvas bag. As he did so, he noticed a small tattoo of a boomerang on the robber's thumb. Okay, so you see here the development of the plot. Okay, it's another person coming in, okay, pointing a blade against his neck. Okay, so here there's no fighting scene or anything. Jimmy was very smart. He emptied every note and cent in the cash register. All right, and yeah, to build the plot, okay, he noticed a small tattoo of a boomerang on the robber's thumb. I add this line to bring the plot into it. Okay, so because I want the robber to be caught at the end of the day, so I bring this idea into the essay. Now let us look at the next paragraph. Having the loot secured, the man fled. Jimmy's mind was bustling in contemplation. The tattoo was very familiar. Now, where have I seen it before? Suddenly, he straightened his torso as the realization awakened in him. Without a moment's delay, he reported the robbery to the police, disclosing his conjecture. Okay, so he realized who it was. Okay, so he immediately called the police. Let us look at the next paragraph. Before daybreak, Jimmy's accurate assessment had led the police to arrest the culprits, one of them being James, his new colleague, who had the tattoo of the boomerang on his thumb. Okay, so this is the essay so this is the end of the essay. I didn't want to have a lengthy end, so I just end it like this. Okay, before daybreak, Jimmy's accurate assessment had led the police to arrest the culprits, one of them being James, his new colleague, who had the tattoo of the boomerang on his thumb. Okay, so if you see this ending, okay, I made it very simple. I didn't want to write a very lengthy ending. A very simple one, but would help you to end the essay in a very nice way. You know, you only have 1 hour when you write continuous writing in your SPM examination. So you may not want to write a very lengthy essay, but write something that is simple and short, but you make it rich in terms of grammar, meaning to say without any grammatical errors. Try to use some good, reasonable vocabulary. I believe in this essay, I did not use many too difficult vocabularies. They are just reasonable ones for you to handle them. So what you can do is you can just list down the vocabulary that I have shared earlier. You can try to write the essay on your own, and then you compare with the essay that I have shared with you. So that is all for today's lesson. Until I see you again, thank you and bye.